is true. I've had the opportunity to look at all of that, and I was a little bit curious about first the resignation and then the president's statement as well. And I formed the conclusion that this was not a president that was trying to exert accountability. This was more of a negotiated exit between the minister and the president.
Negotiated exit?
Yes. Because, first of all, you have Cecilia Dapaah. I think the president and Cecilia spoke. And instead of telling her that this is a serious offense and you cannot stay in office while this serious issue is brewing in my government, and that this requires an investigation and I'm going to take action. It is more of the backroom gymnastics where Cecilia was prevailed upon to step aside. Because if you read her resignation letter, she already talked about an investigation. At the time, nobody had said Cecilia needed to be investigated. She had taken let's first of all stick to what she was dealing with. There was an issue in the public domain, and she wants us to believe that she took a voluntary decision to resign. So then she in the resignation, she talked about the fact that she looks forward to the investigation which will clear her. Nobody had made any statement about government investigating her. Immediately the statement came up, the president then comes out to say, well, we think your integrity will be restored. First of all, the president probably knows something that we all don't know. And in intelligence, there are some things that somebody does that he doesn't have to explicitly say to you, but you get as they call it, you will get the memo. So here you are, you have government agents, you have the president that wants an investigation done, but he sends a signal that this investigation must somehow lead to the innocence of this woman. So even though he hasn't said it especially that I don't want to investigate and I don't want you to indict her, his body language is clear. I think in organized crime, body language even speaks more than speech. So you have a statement like that from the president at a time when at the same time he wants this investigation done, and then he is still sending the signal to anybody that investigation must necessarily lead to the whitewash of the reputation of the person concerned. That is just a way of saying that this will go nowhere, in my opinion. And it's a continuum of what has been happening to this president and his government. I think the president, for some reason, exhibits weakness and incapability of dismissing his appointees or coming out strongly when issues of corruption comes up. You remember what's his name? Dubois' case. Dubois himself said he was stepping aside. The president said, and his statement came before the president. After that statement came, the president said, well, your appointment is terminated with immediate effect. And everybody was like, the guy already said he has stepped aside. So has he been sacked or has he stepped aside? It is just what we always hear, that some investigation will continue or will start and we never hear anything again. You remember in the case of Dubois, the vice president's name was mentioned. The vice president indicated that he wanted this matter investigated. As we speak today, the vice president is not under investigation over the issues that was so serious as to let Dubois leave out of office. And then it then looks like Dubois is going because he opened his mouth about what was happening. Okay, Dubois was not, and Dubois was the serious government insider. And what he said about the vice president was so serious. He was talking not about something he heard. He was talking from what we call first person account, that this is how this system runs. If you want to find your way into the door, this is how it works when it comes to the vice president. And I thought that is something that should have been investigated. He was fired. The case was supposed to be investigated. As we speak, the vice president is not under investigation. Therefore, it appears that Dubois was just fired because he had opened his mouth too wide. So you see the situation where the president's body language always speaks of a level of uncomfortability when it comes to allegations of corruption and misconduct against his appointees. And then he doesn't seem to have the balls to be able to fire his appointees. So, and that's a very, very serious lapse for a leader that so talked about corruption before he came into office. On the issue of Madam Cecilia Dapaah, I think, first of all, there can only be two things why a person will have such amount of cash, physical cash, in his or her possession. And if I have your permission, I can go through the two scenarios.
Ghana's gold.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
One is the fact that perhaps Cecilia Dapaah herself does not believe in the financial sector that the government has created. Because, you see, people say, why didn't you put it at the bank? The bank is not a place for safekeeping. The bank takes your money and they invest it, okay? So right now, the banks don't know where to invest. When you go and put that money in government bonds, and the most secure places where government banks invest money, either they give you a loan and you repay back with interest, or the bulk of bank investment has to do with government treasuries and bonds. You know that the bond market has collapsed. So it appears to me that perhaps she has that kind of money under her bed because she doesn't believe in the financial system that the government has collapsed. If you want to believe something like that, then you now have to gauge how bad this government has performed. This is a government that came into office promising to clean up the financial sector, ended up blowing $20 billion on banks that required $9 billion investment to make them more liquid. And after 4 or 5 years, if their own ministers do not have confidence in the financial system, it tells you that this government has failed and that the $20 billion that they invested in the cleanup was a waste of public sector resources. I don't know whether you heard the story about a minister whose family house got burnt in East Legon last year, and the fact that plenty dollars got burnt as well in that house.
I've heard those rumors.
Yeah, and so you realize that day in and day out, these public officials appear to be holding money at home. Apart from the risk that they pose to themselves, it is also perhaps a way of not having a judgment of the nature of the financial sector, because you can't go and buy bonds because they have collapsed the bond market. The financial sector is completely flat on the floor, and therefore people are now beginning to hoard money. That's one aspect. The second aspect, in my opinion, has to do more with illicit finances and money laundering. And so now, what is important now is the new, if you look at the new Anti-Money Laundering Act, which was passed, I think, in 2020, it is very clear. If you are in possession of any property which you cannot account for, or whose sources are deemed to be questionable, it is deemed to be that that property or money is part of illicit proceeds. So, who will keep this amount of money in her house, his or her house, considering the risk that it poses to that person? And if you look at the way laundering works, it happens at 3 stages. The first one they call placement. Placement is because people always have money coming from illicit sources. Some come from drug dealing, some come from terrorist activity, some comes from kidnapping, some comes from in public service. It comes from corruption. So people have physical cash, mostly coming, in this case, let's assume, coming from corruption, and it is not something that is legal. So therefore, they first have to take physical possession of those huge sums of money and find ways to introduce them into the financial system. Okay? The second level is what we call layering. So the person already is in possession of suspicious funds, and they like to move that money around in order to disguise their origin. So, for example, in some instances, they will set up like a restaurant, okay? And they already have the illicit placement, which is in the point 1, which I explained. And so they will take physical cash from under their bed, and every day they go to the bank to deposit the part of that money as proceeds from the restaurant. Some will set up a hotel that is probably doing nothing, is not doing well. But every single day, they will make accounts in their books as that the fact that the hotel is fully booked, is occupied. So they will take money from under their bed and go and put it within the banking at the bank as proof that indeed they are running a business, and so they are layering it in order to make the process legal. Some will also go into real estate. So there are places where you see massive real estate going on, and you're wondering, where does all this money come from? So people will buy land, pay cash, develop the properties in the hope that they will now get to the last level of laundering, which is integration. So integration is more that now you have placement, which is you have received illicit money, you found a way to layer it, and now you need to integrate that money back into the financial system. So that money now re-enters the financial system as legitimate earnings. For example, like I said, you have sold real estate, right? You took the money illicitly, you bought land, paid cash, set up real estate. Now somebody wants to buy the real estate, and you say, go and put it in the company's bank account. Okay, so therefore, now the sale now becomes part of the sale of a legitimate business, that you now, the person that pays the money, now pays the money from his bank account to your bank account. And therefore, you can now trace the source of that money. This is how money is laundered, especially in the political circles. And so you realize that people tend to now hold a lot of physical cash, not because they're keeping it there for good, but they first have to layer the money in bits and pieces. So in the restaurant, you cannot go, because within the banking sector, there's also a law. In fact, it is also part of the Anti-Money Laundering Act of 2020. There's also a law that if you begin to put money too much into your account every day, there's what they call a suspicious transaction report that is supposed to be generated about you. So people have to take their time and be placing this and be layering this money bit by bit. And that is why you always have them hoarding those sums of money in their homes. Or sometimes some people will go and dig on some public place, build concrete. In Nigeria, politicians will build an underground tunnel and then build a swimming pool on top of it. So it is appearing to me that these are the only scenarios, the reasons why someone would keep this volume of money. At any time you see, so we always have what we call the norm. The norm is that everybody who works in the normal situation knows, listen, I have 20,000 Ghana cedis. It is very risky to keep this money in my home. Therefore, you want to take it to the bank and invest it or keep it there for whatever reason. But then you always look also out for the unusual. The unusual is the fact that of all the risks that a person faces, what will persuade that person to accommodate that risk or take that risk in order to keep such huge amount of money at home? Senna, we are talking about 1.5 million. I think I've read somewhere where the EPA guy is saying that, well, he will not keep that amount of money at home, but people should not think too much of it because it's possible. If you buy one piece of land at 200,000, if you sold one piece of land at 200,000, or you sold 5, you easily get 1 million in East Legon. I hope, honestly, that they don't go through that tangent because that will even be a lot more serious area to look at. Because if you now go to say that this came from some business, what is that business? What is the history of revenue of that business? How much taxes have you declared to the revenue agency? Who paid you that money? How did you get that money in dollars? Did the person pay? You know that under the law, we don't sell anything in Ghana in dollars. Okay, that's the law. So who paid you in dollars? Or did you get cedis? Who paid you in cedis? How much? Within what period? And then you are now in possession of dollars and euros. What necessitated that decision to take cedis, to take dollar or euro? And where did you get the dollar? Which forex bureau or which bank gave you the dollar? When you enter that realm, you are entering into a very, very deep water. So whichever way this looks, whichever way you look at this scenario, this is a very serious matter. And because it is already coming from the minister herself in a documented legal paper, it will be a very easy thing to look at. And I hope that people don't get intimidated by the president's body language of saying that, well, she has to go, but you dare not indict her by this body language she's showing to the oversight bodies.
So what value would an investigation offer under the circumstances?
I think that this case is not the most complicated one that we are used to. First of all, the owner of the money has admitted, okay, that she owns the property. Under the law, that admission alone, if you call this woman now and you ask her, where did you get 1.3 million, $1 million, 300,000 euros? Where did you get 94,000 to buy all of these? If she is unable to produce proper receipt of how that money came into her possession, she's already guilty of money laundering. Okay, that's one. The other issue is the sources of those monies. If, for example, it turns out that these were from, let's say, overpriced contracts, these were probably from kickbacks, these were from bribes or whatever, then now you go into the second level of it. Who paid the bribes? That's also an offense under the law. So if, for example, a businessman paid her that money, then that businessman can be held responsible for illegally influencing a public officer or bribing a public officer. Bribery is under the criminal code an offense. So then it will go beyond her. Assuming this came from not more than one person, all those people will be drawn into the net, so to speak. And you'll be surprised that some banks might even be affected by this investigation. You'll be surprised that maybe some foreign bureaus might be dragged into this investigation. So this is a very serious investigation that requires a little bit of expertise, but it is not complex at all. It is straightforward. That can be done very, very easily.
What about the funeral donation?
Funeral donation?
Because they said she's had 2 different funerals, one involving her mother. And, because she is Minister for Sanitation, there were businesses that work with the ministry who had decided to donate money to her, and she's keeping money in the box, the funeral box that they use for funeral donation. And then they were taken, so she couldn't detect that the money was reducing. What do you make of that defense and that suggestion?
I have a very interesting. I like this theory. That theory is called the theory of consistency and justification. Okay, and I'll explain to you in a bit. It says that every rational human being, actually, likes to be seen in the eyes of the public as rational. So when they behave in a way that defies rationality and common sense, they then now turn to justify their conduct. So let's, for example, take a simple example. So you have a lady, maybe back home in university, you have friends that say, oh, I hate our guys. 1, they are not ambitious. 2, all of them are carpenters. 3, they are not intelligent. And everybody's like, oh, how for this guy, he doesn't like our guy. 10 years down the line, she invites you to her wedding, and it turns out that she's getting married to an Ewe. And you're like, I thought you don't like Ewe guys. How did you end up with an Ewe? And he will go like, well, this guy was not really born in the Volta region. He was born in Central region. He doesn't even speak the language. So he's trying to justify she's trying to justify her conduct in the hope that what she has done now will appear rational and consistent with what she has said in the past. The funeral donation argument, in my opinion, falls within this theory of consistency and justification. Someone is trying to justify a very weird conduct in the hope that it will align to the normal, rational ways human beings and public officials are supposed to conduct themselves. And for me, I like challenges like this because when you now go and say, I got $1 million, first of all, did they come and pay the donation in dollars? Who did that? Where did that person get the money? Who is that person? So there's no way getting around this. You are not going to open a Pandora's box where every donation, everybody who made donations at the funeral will be subject to this investigation. This actually does not prevent an investigation. It actually enlarges the net. So who came and most times in Ghana, the donations are public announcements. You know that. When they will come and say, so and so donated this amount of money. Some people might donate it quietly, so you want to know why. Is it a business person who does business with the ministry that came to donate money? Did they donate the money in dollars? Who changed the money from dollars into cedis? And mostly, when your mother dies, okay, Sana, the children are not the one who keep the money. So that money goes to the family. It goes to the head of the family. The family. So when somebody dies, the person is the property of the family. You are just a child. You realize that the elders of the family are the ones that become those in charge of the funeral. So how did it happen? That the minister is the one in possession of the money. But this does not stop the investigation. In fact, it makes it more exciting. That you can look, this would have been the most biggest funeral donation in history. But then why will people, and like I said, anytime you see something unusual, it's because something wrong is happening. Something wrong may be happening. So if this is unusual, where funeral all of a sudden has big donation in dollars and in euros, then you want to find out how, why, who, when did all this happen. So people like to say these things, like I was telling you, the chief executive of EPA, who in my opinion should have resigned by now because of what has happened to our environment in respect of galamsey. They are now trying to play this the devil's advocate. Oh, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. This is not a question of maybe. The woman has already admitted to the fact that she owns that money. There's not going to be a maybe. It can only be that this is the source of the money. Period. And if this is the source of the money, this is not like somebody is speculating that the minister might have this, so then you can say, well, maybe it came from here or it came from there. She already has admitted being in possession of that property. The Money Laundering Act is very clear that a person commits an offense of money laundering if the person knows or ought to have known that a property that is in her possession forms part of proceeds of an unlawful activity. So for me, it is very clear. This thing is bigger than just call for an investigation. If that money came from an illicit source, that source must be hauled into the investigation. That is the way things are done in a civilized system.
Raymond, thank you.
The investigation goes beyond the minister, actually. It has to go more to the sources of that money.
Thank you.